بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد صادق الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على حبيبنا وشفيعنا وملاذنا وقرة أعيننا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه في الأولين، اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه في الآخرين، اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. يقول سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أعوذ من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وإن كل محدثة بدعة وإن كل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة ثم ما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala jalla wa ala, the only one being and entity worthy of worship, and we testify that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is indeed his final messenger and prophet who came with the message of La ilaha illallah and the Khatam al-Nabi and the seal of all prophets. We also remember in our dua before we go to our main khutbah for today, Muslims all around the globe, those who are in difficulty, those who are in danger of life, whether they are in poverty, whether they are in difficulty within their homes and their relationships all around the world, here at home and globally, especially for those kids in Yemen. And I urge each and every one of us to remember Yemen in your special du'as, as the news reports come out of that part of the world where kids are now literally dying because of malnourishment. It's been going on for some time, and it's sad to see the state of, but the least that we can do is make dua for those children who are dying because they don't have even a morsel of food to put in their mouth. You know, the thing about this time of year, as we go on to our main point of the khutbah today, the end of the year, and whether we have different views on the holidays or whatever, but the fact of the matter is that this time of year, many home, and we spend a lot of time at home, whether you're a father, a mother, son, daughter. Everyone comes back from college, you have off from work, and generally this time becomes a time of reconnecting with family. And if you remember, when I had the pleasure of being here last time for the khutbah, we talked about the struggles of the youth and how the youth, what they go through in the society. Discussions, the points I mentioned was around this idea of the family. Right? Do as you would like your child to do. Do as you would like your son or daughter to do and emulate you. Be the example. And so family, especially the parental-child relationship, was a big point of that conversation, where our children, our youth need a very strong foundation at home, able to face the Islamophobic sentiment at times outside of the home. And so today what I wanted to do is take advantage of the time of year that we're in, while we're home and while we're reconnecting with our son and daughter and mother and father, is to reflect on our role within the family. And I'm going to specifically focus on the role of the father. And let me make a disclaimer, this is not to sort of minus the mothers or the kids from today's khutbah, absolutely not. Right, so for the sisters who are listening, thinking to you, because I'm talking about the role of the father, these fathers are your husbands. They're the fathers of your children. The sons and daughters who are here, I'm talking about your fathers. And obviously the fathers who are here, I'm talking to you and me directly. So this is a conversation that needs to happen in every home, and it's a discourse that we need to open up more frequently than we do. You see, the fact of the matter is, in this day and age, the institution of family has been systematically under attack. If you look at, the media, social media, just generally speaking, over the last 20 years or so, you see the institution of marriage has been under attack. Less and less people, generally, in the United States, even globally, I would argue, are getting married. And those who are getting married are getting divorced more frequently. Right? So the institution of marriage upon which family stands has weakened over time. Those values, even in the US here, you read US history as early as 1920s, 1930s, it was a very, very strong sort of image of that mother, father, children picture of the family. Today you see a lot more single parents. So the institution of family has become weaker and weaker. And within the institution of family, interestingly enough, I came across a few articles around this, where the role of the father has completely flipped, I would say, 180 degrees as portrayed in the media. What do I mean? So over the last, if you just pick up some of the cartoons that came out, let's say in the 90s and the 2000s, you see the way a father is portrayed in those particular shows is a foolish, incompetent, almost a dumb character. And then that's the reality of how media is portraying the role of a father within the family. And that's important for us to understand before we dive into what says about a father's role in the family, is because these are the same shows our kids are watching. This is the society we live in, you and I, where our youth grow up watching the stuff and getting influenced by it. And so one of the things I came across in my research was there is something called a fatherless crisis, apparently, in the US. And that's obviously more relating to the physical absence of the father from the home. And that happens more in areas, the interior areas, where there's poverty and crime and so on and so forth. But alhamdulillah, our community, I feel we're not facing that kind of challenge. Alhamdulillah, majority of our families are traditional mother, father, children at home. But what we do face, and I want you to listen to this carefully, is father absenteeism. And the difference that while you and I may be there at home as a father, we're not really there. A lot of times, fathers, traditionally speaking, culturally speaking, our role has been very much primary breadwinner. You bring in the money, there's food in the home, the fridge is full, kids have clothes, there's a roof over your head, my job is done. And fathers, a lot of times, they fail to go to the next step of being emotionally involved with their child's handling children as they go through the different ages and the phases of development, and being an active participant in rearing your children. That's something that a lot of Muslim families, maybe not yours, maybe not mine, but a lot of Muslim families struggle with. Is this very, very strict definition of gender roles. Child is crying, I don't have nothing to do with it. That's the woman's job. That's sort of the strict mindset a lot of us come from an immigrant perspective, right? That's what we're fed, and that's the reality of it, like it or not. And so what today's khutbah, inshallah, in the next 20 minutes, what I want to do is lay out the Quranic principles around what the Quran says, what the hadith says about you and me as a father. And I speak as a father, much in my journey as fatherhood than many of you, alhamdulillah, but it's a joint conversation. It's not a finger pointing, it's a reminder to myself. But there's a lot to be done as fathers to start sort of fortifying the foundation of our family again, inshallah. So the first thing that I want to share, I came across a very beautiful explanation, and the Quran talks about the role of the father in many different places. There's the story of Yusuf and Yaqub, of course we know that. There is the mention of Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam. There is the mention of Luqman and his son. Right, so the Quran is very clear on what that relationship looks like between a father and his children. And so if we look at the most obvious of those, which is Yaqub alayhi salam and Yusuf, his son, You know, in Surah Yusuf, he goes to his father in the beginning verses, and he says, إِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِيَبِيهِ يَا أَبَتِ إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ أَحَدَ عَشَرَ كَوْكَبًا وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ رَأَيْتُهُ لِسَاجِدِينَ. So now he's talking to his father, and he says, "Oh my father, I have seen a dream in which I saw 11 stars, the sun and the moon, prostrating doing me." And At-Tabari, Imam At-Tabari in his tafsir, the way he interpreted it, and Ibn Abbas said the same thing, he said that the sun and the moon actually represent the father and the mother of Yusuf alayhi salam, and the stars are his brothers. And interestingly enough, if you apply that principle to what modern science tells us about the solar system, right? So we have a sun and a moon, and we have planets and stars within our system, solar system. Everything is illuminated by what? By the sun. Everything from the moon to the earth to all the other planets gets its light from this one illuminating body called the sun. And so if you look at the parallel between the dream and what we know today of what science, the role of the father is meant to be that illuminating body for the entire family. If the father has that clear ability to set a vision for the family, the entire family is set on that right course. Of course, in partnership with the mother, it's all in partnership, but that particular ni'mah and that role, those guardrails are given to the father to exercise that particular role. So the sun and the moon, which I found very profound, is that if the father is sort of absent and not there, the family is sort of navigating in darkness. But if the father is strong, has a vision that is laid out in the light of Quran and Sunnah, the family is able to follow the lead. Alhamdulillah. So the first point I wanted to mention in terms of what we can do as fathers, right? What we as fathers in the Muslim community can actually do differently. And inshallah, my hope is to maybe 3 or 4 points, and then we'll be done, inshallah ta'ala. And a lot of times what happens is that you and I as fathers, we expect perfection for our families. We have this picture perfect thing in mind, you know, however many kids, 2, 3 kids, you know, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more or less, you know, perfect picture of, and, you know, my job, 2 cars outside. We draw this picture in our mind, and when we don't quite live up to that, we start torturing ourselves and saying, I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. And the more we go to, you know, ICNA convention, or the more lectures we listen to, the more we realize how bad we are. And so I wanted to sort of go back all the way in history to the first family, and without argument, Adam alayhi salam. And these are the people, the Anbiya are the people that we look to that are perfect in our particular definition, right? These are the people we look up to. These are the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided with His divine mercy. And so if you look at the first ever family, Adam alayhi salam, what is that family? Habil and Qabil. One son killed the other. Subhanallah. By no means is it a perfect family. You move on to the next family, Nuh alayhi salam. How is that a perfect family? The son obviously is on the other end of the belief system, rejects his father, has nothing to do with him, right? A troubled family, if you will. You go on to the next family, Ibrahim alayhi salam, has a very different relation with his own father, Azar, who is an idolater and a disbeliever. And on top of that, when Ibrahim alayhi salam becomes a father, he is commanded to slaughter his own son. How is that normal? Subhanallah. You move on to Yaqub and Yusuf alayhi salam, where Yusuf alayhi salam, his entire story, as we find out, Binyamin, his brother, is sold for pennies into slavery. Imagine, it's sort of funny if you think about it. In our day and age, if one of our community families, a brother sold another brother on eBay or Amazon, it would become the talk of the town. So by no means is our family anywhere close to as challenging as what the prophets experienced. Move on even further in history. Maryam alayhi salam, single mother, raising. And then of course Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who was an orphan, born an orphan, and then of course lost his mother at 6 years old. So none of the prophets, more or less, had perfect families. And so it behooves us to reflect from that, and rather than expecting perfection for our families and a particular standard that we develop in our own minds, we should learn from the example of the Prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives each and every one of us unique challenges. Your son may not be on the path of deen. Your daughter may have different difficulties. You as a father may be experiencing certain challenges. Your wife, the mother, has different challenges. But the fact of the matter is, Islam is a perfect system for imperfect people, rather than the other way around. We try to become perfect people. Islam is the perfect system for imperfect individuals. And so we need to internalize this point and actually be okay with not being perfect. The second point, inshallah, is from the story of Luqman alayhi salam. You see, Luqman, according to Ibn Abbas and some of the other mufassirin who've reported on this, Luqman is mentioned by name in the Quran, obviously, but he is, by ijma', he is not a prophet. By consensus of the scholars, he is not considered a prophet, but he's considered a wise man. And according to some reports, he was actually an Ethiopian slave who was also a carpenter. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala records his conversation with his son, Luqman's son, and we don't know the context of this particular conversation. We don't know if they were sitting in a lounge or whatever. If for all that matters, he could have been working in his carpentry place, talking to his son, just like any other father-son conversation. We don't know. But the point is not where it happened or why it happened, but the point is what Luqman said to his son. And amongst the things he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relates, وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانُ لِابْنِهِ وَهُوَ يَعِذُهُ يَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّ الشِّرْكَ لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ. And so if you just break down Luqman's words for a second, he addresses his son, Ya bunay. He doesn't say, Ya waladi, oh my boy, oh my son. He actually brings him even closer by using the word Ya bunay. So there's an expression of love. Before a big lesson is about to come, of love. A lot of us, what we like to do as fathers, because we don't like to emotionally engage a lot of times, is we shout commands. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. But unfortunately, a lot of times that goes right over the head of your son or daughter, because there's no preface to it. There's no fertile ground, if you will. And the language of love and expression is something I talked about in my last khutbah as well. Adopt a language of love with our children. So clearly Luqman here, before he's about to lay down probably the biggest lesson of his son's life, is he's addressing him with love. Ya bunay. And then he goes on to say, La tushrik billah. So focus on the simplicity of the message. He doesn't give him a long essay and says, you know, my son, I want to give you the entire blueprint of life, and here are 100 things you should do and don't do. He keeps it simple. He says, La tushrik billah. Don't be ungrateful to Allah. In other words, practice thankfulness. And then he directly jumps to Inna shirka la dhulmun azim, which is, in fact, if you think about it logically, shukr and shirk are not in the same light. The opposite of shirk would be taqwa, believing in the oneness of Allah. And shirk is the entire opposite of that. So he doesn't tell his son, be amongst those who testify to the oneness of Allah. He says, be amongst those who thank Allah. And then he goes on to say, shirk is indeed one of the worst sins that you can commit. What is it that we can learn from this? This lesson that we as fathers need to impart and learn from Luqman is teaching and emulating for our children thankfulness. Because thankfulness is the first step to any ibadah. Thankfulness is the first step to any ibadah. Think about it. How can you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can you testify to His greatness and oneness and magnificence and submit boldly without saying, I am thankful? It's a paradox. You can't say, I don't thank Allah, yet I worship Him. It doesn't work. You have to be thankful, and then you take the leap towards worship. So the beauty of what Luqman did here was he was brief, he was concise, And it's a bite-sized lesson. A lot of times what we like to do is give perhaps long lectures where our children are sitting maybe half an hour in front of us and they probably took away 1 point. But be brief. As a father, that's probably one of the most powerful tools we have is your words. Be brief in your words, but be mindful and powerful in what you say. Moving on, inshallah, one of the last things I wanted to talk about, if we have time, maybe two, is engaging your son, your daughter's intelligence, right? Showing respect. In this regard, we're reminded of the example of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam when Fatima, in the later days of his life, it's a very, very famously narrated instance where when she would come into a gathering, he would be the first one to get up and offer his own seat to her. This is the Prophet for whom the entire universe, the entire creation was created. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he would actually get up out of respect for his youngest daughter, Fatima. This is the respect, right? And so one of the things we learn from, in fact, the interaction of Ibrahim and Ismail, and I talked about this, I believe, previously as well, but in Surah Al-Safat, Ibrahim alayhi salam is relating the of sacrificing Ismail alayhi salam to Ismail alayhi salam. He's telling his son, this is what I saw. And in that conversation, he goes on to ask him, فَانْظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى? What do you think? Now let me tell you why that's important. At this point, according to some of the interpretations, Ismail is no older than about 10 years old. He's not 25, he's not 30, he's not a man by our standards, he's a young boy. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, who's carrying this huge burden, one of the only people on earth who believes in Allah as one, affords the respect to his son to actually ask for his opinion. ماذا ترى? What do you think? I want us to turn the camera for a second and ask, if you're a father sitting here, or even a mother, how many times do we actually ask our sons and daughters who are 8, 9, 10, 15, 20, what do you think? It's a very respectful way to engage someone, to actually ask for their opinion. Again, going back to what I just said earlier, a lot of times it's do this, I think, I said, and there's no two-way street. So as mothers even, we need to develop a two-way street. Engage your child's, your son, your daughter's intelligence. They're smarter, way smarter than you think. And I've seen it in my own experience being with this community, having been a teacher here for different ages, that our sons, our daughters, our youth are much more capable than we think them to be. So engaging your child's intelligence, but not least, is thinking long term. And I'll sort of finish with this, is the example that we find in the Quran about thinking long term. I'll share two. But one of the things I wanted to make very clear is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the role of the father. One of the things is to plan long term for the family. And a lot of us do, perhaps financially, opening up this college account or maybe this retirement account or paying off the house in 15 years instead of 30. And that's all well and good. There's nothing wrong with that. But the ultimate long-term planning is the akhirah. And that's where you and I often fall short. We don't think about the moral implications or the implications of what we teach our children on how their akhirah will turn out. And from that perspective, the first dua that we look at is Ibrahim alayhi salam. رَبِّ جَعَلْنِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي رَبَّنَا وَتَقَبَّلْ دُعَاء رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْحِسَابِ. So he makes dua in the Quran, Ya Allah, send from my progeny someone who will teach all of mankind the book and the hikmah and recite to them your words. Thousands of years. This is not his immediate son or Ishaq alayhi salam. The dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam was answered with who? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Rasulullah was the answer to Ibrahim's dua. But look at the time span, long-term planning, thousands of years apart. And because of that dua, you and I can call ourselves Muslims today, alhamdulillah. The second example we find Zakaria alayhi salam. In Surah Al-Maryam, the opening verses, where Zakaria alayhi salam is crying out to Allah, إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا قال ربي إني وهن العظم مني واشتعل الرأس شيبة ولم أكن بدعاء ربك شقيا. He knows he's old, his hair's gone white, but he's crying out to Allah, Ya Allah, grant me an offspring. Why? Not because people are making all sorts of excuses and throwing insults at me. يَرِثُنِي وَيَرِثُ مِنْ آلِ يَعْقُوبَ وَجَعَلْهُ رَبِّي رَضِيًّا. So someone who can inherit from me and inherit from the lineage of Yaqub alayhi salam. In other words, Islam. Someone who can take forward this message and carry on the legacy of taqwa and Islam for the rest of mankind. That's his long-term planning. And so we as fathers need to and inculcate this ability to think long-term, yes, within the confines of the dunya, but even beyond, for our children, for our spouses, and our entire family. So with that, inshallah, I just want to recap real quick what we talked about. There were 4 points we touched upon. Number one was around expectation, right? Don't expect perfection or torture yourself by thinking that you're below some standard. Allah has given you unique challenges as a family. Embrace them in light of Islam, the perfect system. Number two, we talked about engaging your child's intelligence. Engaging your child's intelligence. Engage them, doesn't matter how old they are. Afford them the respect to ask, what do you think? What is your opinion? Number three, we talked about thinking long term, having a vision. And the last thing that we have a couple minutes that we can mention as well is this idea of being preachy, right? So a lot of times we as men, we like to sort of become a little preachy at times. And what's important is if you look at the Quran and the communication style of the Quran, it preaches, but in very controlled doses. Majority of the Quran, if not majority, a good part of the Quran is actually a question and answer format. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has questions within the text of the Quran, a lot of times for the mushrikun, for the different audiences, but the Quran has a very unique style of communicating in question and answer, rather than do this, do that. So a lot of times we need to then make sure we're inculcating that in our life and actually engaging in a question-answer format, rather than a prose or a narrative or a monologue even, because obviously that's way more effective than just laying a bunch of information on someone, right? So those are the 4 points, inshallah, that we can try to incorporate in our lives starting today, and inshallah become better fathers, mothers, better sons, better daughters, and strengthen the unit of family. Because the family, a strong family means a strong society, as we all know. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to become better family members for one another. Take advantage of this time at home, through the new year until whenever you go back to work, is reconnect with your sons and your daughters in the spirit of fatherhood as Islam teaches us. Jazakumullahu khair wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.